He's the man to do the damage. Oh! As he looks for another headshot!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Richard Lewis Show. A strange one today, because obviously I don't talk to anyone in Overwatch because I've blocked them all on Twitter. But I decided I would unblock one representative from Overwatch to come on the show and talk to me, because even though I've broken all the biggest stories in Overwatch, despite not being endemic to Overwatch, I don't know anything about Overwatch, obviously. So Harsha is here, one of the first ever sort of legendary coaches, in my opinion. Had all the top jobs and has got lots of stories. He's here to guide us through his thoughts on the Overwatch League and why he decided to retire from esports. Increasingly pertinent sentiment in this neck of the woods. Thank you so much for joining me, brother. How are you doing?
Well, I think first of all, that was a very generous introduction, and I'm very glad to have avoided the purge from your block list. So good to be here.
The funny thing is, what the plebs never realize is, I block them because they're unimportant, but I talk to like pros and managers and obviously everyone all the time, owners all the time, because their opinions and information matters. If you've got a Widowmaker feet profile pic and you're tweeting L plus ratio or whatever at me, I couldn't give a fuck what you think about anything.
Or ever. Rip Bozo, the new one.
Yeah, Rip Bozo. It's like, listen, don't get me wrong, maybe in 10 years you'll be capable of having some sort of thought that the planet should listen to, but up until that point, you definitely, it's actually a crime I have to read your opinions. Like, Twitter should be 18 plus. That would really help clean it up for starters. That would be great. But whatever, kids are kids. It's all fine. And I'm a curmudgeonly old man, and we should have conflict between ourselves, right? So that's fine. So look, man, I don't think that was a particularly glowing, I think that was entirely accurate summary of your career. Let's be clear. You were an analyst when you first came in, after you moved across from being a content creator again, did so much foundational work in creating content around Overwatch back when a lot of people were still on the fence about going all in on it. Would there be value in creating an Overwatch podcast? No one really knew. And obviously you have to do about 40 or 50 episodes to even kind of, grow and all of that stuff. So there was a lot of people that kind of like stayed away from it. Then you ended up a coach at Vancouver Titans, lots to talk about there. And then you ascended to the pantheon of Houston Outlaws. So for me, you've been associated with, some great teams, including obviously being an analyst at Shock, being the greatest team, in my opinion. I think they've done almost everything right. So look, we'll get back to all of that stuff, but let's just start with getting out. And now you're retired and you've left it behind despite that glittering CV. And so I'm kind of wanting to pick your brains just as to get an understanding as to why you decided to do it, because I'm sure you must have had offers, right?
So I actually still had a year on my contract. Basically, if I hadn't decided to retire, I'd still be on Houston Outlaws right now, or get fired or something like that. But it would have basically been like, yeah, I still had the ability to be in the scene. And if I wanted to leave as a coach, I guess I probably could have been a GM at certain teams. But I think I don't know. I think when I grew up, I grew up with esports, right? I wasn't somebody that was in the scene, but I saw it develop from being just tiny brands, really small events. And then as I got older, it became this bigger and bigger spectacle, right? And so it became something more aspirational to me than just something that I would watch. And then once I got onto the inside, it felt like when I used to watch as a kid, there was all this passion, everything was done for love of the game. And then when I got in, it became oh, this is just a business like everything else. And it was feeling more and more like that. And, it doesn't come with the benefits of working in corporate life where you have a 9 to 5, you can check out, you can disconnect, spend time with family, stuff like that. And so basically, like, I felt like I was working in sort of like a passionless industry, but I didn't have the benefits of being able to just like disconnect from it. And so it felt like, this is time. I'm not loving this anymore. So it's time to just be a normal person.
Well, so why? How do you become disenchanted with esports in a relatively short space of time? I got to say it. Like it took nearly 2 decades for the shit to get kicked out of me. And I'm in a very contentious position. I'm aware, like, when you're the guy that tells the kids Santa Claus isn't real, you're not going to be popular. I get that. Right. And that's essentially how you would sum up my career. I'm the guy that says, this is a bad idea. You shouldn't do this. Or,
this match was fake.
Yeah. Or this match was fixed. Or, that player that you really like, massive piece of shit in the background. Yeah. Or, that org that you really like, piece of shit to all of their players. And obviously, when you put yourself in that position, you are always going to be in conflict. It's the price you have to pay to do the kind of work that I want to do. Generally, I found coaches and players are certainly revered to a much higher degree than, journalists or content creators or anyone else. So what was it that essentially wore you down and made you throw in the towel? Because I mean, I know a little bit, and we'll get into it, some of the jobs that you've held. But I mean, just in generalities, I thought you would have stayed in esports for a long, long time.
I thought I would have as well. Like, to be honest, when I was in college, like studying medicine, basically I thought like, there's no way I want to be like a doctor, or there's no way I want to have like a cubicle job or something like that. Right. But then I don't know. I think things just changed for me in the sense that like I probably came into an esport that was it felt artificial, right? Mm-hmm. I think that I had to interact with like business people. I wasn't interacting with people that like, in the team space. Yeah, of course, all these people are in here for the love of the game. But then when you talk to the owners, you talk to the people around the league, like everybody kind of propping it up. It felt like just weird, I wasn't, I guess, lucky enough outside of being on Shock to be in a org that kind of had that endemic support, I guess, like, something like London Spitfire, where they had Cloud9 backing them. I was part of Vancouver, so we had like the Canucks backing us, and kind of Luminosity, but not really. And then when I was in Houston, obviously it's a media company backing Houston, right? So I think maybe it could have just been the environments I was part of, but this is going to sound like very vague, but it's just like, talking to these people, it felt like I was just talking to people that didn't know anything about like games. And so I was like, why are you here?
Yeah, I mean, it's sad because as esports has become commodified, where there's a commodity, there are grifters and panhandlers. And, panhandler is actually a really good term. I wish we would sort of bring back because, it kind of, it's kind of indicative of the fact that this has been part of human history for a very, very long time. That esports was a frontier that was unregulated, didn't have a lot of infrastructure, certainly doesn't have any like regulatory body looking at it. I mean, all of the financial scams, for example, that have gone on in esports, everyone will get away with them because they were done in a sort of quite cleverly kind of gray area, right? And so and that's deliberate, that's all by design, that's why those people were here in the first place. But for people that just want to make money by being like a LinkedIn hero, let's say, right? Those types of grifter, obviously they have to say all the right buzzwords, but ultimately they lack any substance, they lack any ideas, they lack any coherence as to what they're doing. And that is clear, in the failures of their many projects. And, I think with a recession looming and everything, we're going to see some shrinkage. Those grifters are going to either go somewhere else or they're going to be denied the right to start to, play at this esports casino with other people's money. But I agree with you. I acutely feel the same thing. I go to esports conferences, I talk to esports people these days. Supposedly big names, big thinkers, industry leaders,
Right.
and they're morons or frauds at best 99% of the time.
It feels like everybody's kind of peddling like some vision that they have that's like obviously not reality. And if you talk to anybody that like grew up with games or even like knows about video games, like it's crazy. Like I mean, obviously, I'm maybe we'll get into this, but like the concept of franchise leagues in general, when games are so like temporary, like there's so many concepts to me that feel so strange, and it's like there's so many people behind these concepts pushing them down your throat, and I guess they have to have them succeed because their businesses depend on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it just feels like they're so poorly thought out. And I guess maybe my other problem in terms of like retiring is that I followed like a lot of other games.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like I before I worked in Overwatch, or before I wanted to go, do anything in Overwatch, I was a huge fan of League of Legends, like wanted to potentially start working as like an analyst in League of Legends, started like, actually writing articles about it.
Mm-hmm.
I follow CSGO like pretty heavily. Even before I think Overwatch, I was probably following CSGO. So like I've and I know you've had your run-ins, but like I followed FGC games as well. So like I've kind of like seen a bunch of different maybe scenes and genres, and I guess that's part of why I got so disillusioned with Blizzard and like Overwatch in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, Activision Blizzard, man, they're part of the problem in terms of, like you say, this wave of industry leaders that you think should have like nominally good ideas about what to do.
Right.
But they there's been a huge culture shift. Like for like the Activision Blizzard I grew up with, I used to go to events, meet people, they had an incredibly dedicated team that were very present at a lot of esports events. And you can talk to these guys, they used to send me gifts, which I always told them, listen, you're not getting good coverage if you fuck up. Like, I'm not for sale like that. But they would still send out stupid little press release packages. I got a StarCraft 2 brooch up there, of which only a few thousand were printed. I was the first journalist I think the first English speaking journalist to complete a full review of StarCraft 2, because I had early access, and just little things like this down the years, because I think as an esports stalwart, there was a time they valued feedback. And the big cultural shift for me at Activision Blizzard is they've stopped. They don't care about feedback anymore. They are the same as every other Silicon Valley CEO company. They believe they are absolutely right, and they seek only validation. If you criticize them in any way, shape, or form, you are persona non grata, because you clearly don't have the brains to see what they're doing is the right thing to do. And so that attitude has only been reinforced by the hiring practices. They're hiring people from outside of esports with no esports experience, because again, esports was so insecure that he's got like 10 years at Fox Sports. He must be able to make us a legitimate sport. It's like, no, what the fuck? Why would he be the answer? And it's like all the companies are doing this at the moment, and it's just compounding this culture of zero feedback accepted, which makes everything worse. And
what's so silly is that like obviously the market that esports appeals to, that's a market that like traditional sports are trying to take over. But then also that there's things like, all these leagues are copying like the NFL, the NBA, that kind of like format. And then suddenly you hear like the NBA is trying to think of like a mid-season tournament they can do, like these kind of ideas that are in esports. And like you realize like, why were we like trying to copy something that's like going to keep evolving in the first place? Like, I don't know. It's just a disillusionment. I have kind of like a follow-up kind of like funny story in terms of, what you mentioned about the culture shift too, is that in 2018, when all of Blizzard itself and then like the Overwatch League, it was all held in LA or like around LA, Irvine as well, right? One day actually Jeff Kaplan came into the Overwatch League. Like, I think he was just like visiting behind the scenes, talking to teams, like asking for their feedback about the game and stuff like that. And I like ran into him in the hallway. I probably had like 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. And this guy like walked up to me and said, "Oh, I watch all your videos, and like you have like really good feedback for the game," and like asked me about suggestions and stuff like that. Meanwhile, when you talk to Activision Blizzard, like the execs from like other parts of the company, they have no idea who you are. They like don't care about your opinion, and they don't really want to hear it. So it felt like already that, I mean, obviously this is probably later than what you're referencing, but already then to me, like that's when I realized like there's a very big cultural shift, and it's probably never going to be like overcome, basically.
No, I don't think so either. I think the next culture shift that's going to happen at Activision Blizzard is going to simply just be with the Microsoft takeover. Yeah. They're going to change up a tier management. We're probably going to come in and be just a different flavor of asshole. I mean, why wouldn't they be? So look, let's start then. You hear about the Overwatch League. Now, when I first heard about the Overwatch League, I think my reaction was was recorded quite extensively.
Right.
I'd seen leagues like this implode before. Regional esports doesn't really make sense to what we do. I think it's very limiting. And I think also I've just never seen an esport like you can't make people love a game. You can't, you can't force it down people's throats and make them follow a team, make them love a game, make them want to be good, make them want to enter on a path to pro. These things all have to happen organically, historically. And, I'm saying that again with 18 years experience.
Right. So
what did you see differently to me?
The thing is, I didn't see differently to you. At the time, me, Sideshow, and then like a mutual friend of ours actually had a podcast called like 12 o'clock news, something like that, where we were basically like reacting as like more news came out about the Overwatch League. We were kind of like reacting live to it, and neither of us knew like whether we'd be involved with the Overwatch League, like, or whether we'd be I guess like, what's the word for it, like whether this was our future or whether we were just going to be like journalists or something like that, because at the time both of us were just writing articles basically. And I remember being super skeptical about every single thing they did. Like it didn't, it wasn't organic. It felt forced. They were talking about things like a combine, where I don't know what you're going to do there. Are you going to like look at how somebody jumps with their Winston or something like that? It's like, it's so like, I don't know. But basically like all of these things that they were saying didn't make any sense. But then this is the only place that you can be a professional in Overwatch League, right? Or in Overwatch rather, right? So I kind of just accepted that this is part of what I have to accept. Like, I was passionate about this game. I like really liked it, and I did really want to work at like the pro level. And it was, it's the one game that I have like that top level of proficiency at or experience at. So like, it didn't push me away, even though you can take it as like a warning sign. I kind of just chose to like ignore that and go through anyways, even though everybody's telling me it's going to collapse or that it makes no sense how they set it up and whatnot. Yeah, it's more or less like I just ignored all the signs. And to be honest, I think I did okay for ignoring all the signs. Like I ended up being able to consistently work for those, the 4 years that I was in Overwatch League. And I think I got out at the right time. Everybody says like esports winter is coming. We're obviously like either in a recession or about to be in a recession, whatever it is. And there are going to be massive cuts. I was probably getting a salary I didn't deserve in terms of like what value I was bringing to a company, right? Like, I think it's hard to argue that people in Overwatch League deserve the money that they're getting paid, given, what the scene is. But I kind of just ignored all the warnings.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think many people do this. Like, look, whenever an esports project is announced, you have to take the plunge, because the problem is, whether we admit it or not, most people don't. What we're really trying to do is get in on the ground floor on something. We all think back to like, Day 9 in StarCraft 2 and how he was able to parlay that into at one point being the equivalent of a ninja or, a big influencer. You had to have him at your event. The stage was even named after him at the events. He was living like a rock star. Right. He was getting paid thousands of dollars a day just to be there. When everybody sees that and goes, well, the secret is get there first and establish yourself as the best. And this can be in anything. It doesn't just have to be content creation or casting or coaching. So you have to sort of ignore the signs, because every leap into a new esport is fundamentally stupid. Because at the start, you don't know what you've got, and you could just be wasting a lot of time. You could be in Overwatch, and then, oh, look, there's another equivalent game that
Fortnite could have been the big game.
Yeah, could have been Fortnite, could have been PUBG, could have been anything, right? And so you don't know. And by dedicating your time and developing your expertise to one, you're fundamentally unable to go and work in the other, or then you have to pivot, and then you're the second guy or the third guy or the fourth guy, and suddenly it becomes an issue. So I get it, like I think a lot of people don't really understand what my thoughts about the Overwatch League really are. It's just that, it's like there were so many red flags going in, and ultimately the people I feel sorry for are all the pro players. It's the coaches, it's the analysts, in some cases it's the GMs. I don't feel sorry for a single owner.
Yeah.
Because listen, you guys were seduced by fucking Bobby Kotick and Robert Kraft, and and you bought into this. You read that absolutely ridiculous pitch that said it could be as successful as WWE and all of this nonsense, and you went in despite the fact there were many people in the industry all telling you this was going to be a bust. But the problem you have is when anything like this collapses or downsizes, as we're starting to see now, people lose their jobs, and people lose 3 to 4 years of their life chasing a dream. You get to the end of the rainbow, and then you realize, not only is there not a pot of gold there's a pot of debt, and you've now got these legacy costs that you have to carry for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And it just really fucking sucks. It really sucks, because you're going to see a lot of these pro players, they'll never play another esport. They'll fuck off, they'll do their national service, and then they'll go get a real job. And for this tiny little window of time, they could have had something, maybe in another esport, maybe somewhere else, maybe in this league, if it had just been run better. So, I feel sorry for all of those people that dedicated, all their time and pursuit of excellence to something that was fundamentally broken from the start.
I mean, the really sad thing is a lot of these players are Korean, and in Korea, they have good infrastructure for amateur teams, right? What this allows a lot of people to do is just drop out of high school and pursue pro gaming, right? So if it doesn't work out in 5 years, what are you left with? You're left with okay money. It's not going to last you very long, but then you're left with no high school degree. You have and your young life is already cut short by having to go to the military, right? So it's made me feel really sad that that there are people pursuing their dreams, and what's the most likely outcome is what Overwatch League dies in a year, 2 years, and they're just left with nothing. They're left with a little bit of money, some good memories, but their young adult life is just done basically.
So look, let's get into some specifics, and we can come back and revisit the league and downsizing and all that stuff. Let's talk about Vancouver Titans. Because obviously you were there for a period of time. You left in 2019, which I think was just before a lot of the issues with that org started to really manifest in public. Obviously, I'm the guy I wrote back in May of 2020. I wrote a pretty in-depth expose about everything that was going on there, and the acquisition of Runaway and the problems they had. All around that. So I just wanted to, we've never talked about it. I just wanted to kind of pick your brains a little bit about, all the issues that happened there, because that is a franchise that has a significant amount of investment. Again, one of these, acquisitions by a big group that are supposedly going to take esports by storm. But ultimately, if you look at where they are now and kind of how much, how many problems they've had, it's kind of a little bit embarrassing, I would say.
Yeah.
Based on where they kind of ended up.
I mean, this is going to be kind of wishy-washy and in a sense, because I'm not going to point blame exactly in one direction. I think that the situation was basically like as follows. These guys are sold on like a, you know, a fake idea of what esports is, what it's going to be, right?
Mhm.
They buy into the league. They pick up the best possible team that they can. And, you know, great. They're kind of isolated because this is a company in Canada, right? In Vancouver. We're in LA competing, and we're not really interacting on a day-to-day level or even like, you know, I'm the person interacting with the company. All the communications kind of going between, you know, the team and me, and then me and the company. So it's like there's a pretty fundamental like split there. And if I felt like something, if like the company did something unreasonable, I could argue on behalf of the players. Or if the players were doing something unreasonable, I could tell them, hey, like, you know, you don't really have all this power to do like, you know, certain thing, right? So that's very vague, but just to kind of set the scene, there's like a fundamental split, right? And we could kind of operate independently. We get second place during the season, first place during the regular season, win a tournament. So things are looking pretty good, right? But I guess in some sense, there were problems because the company didn't know what running the team was like. They knew what talking to people that could communicate with the team was like, if that makes sense. And the team, I guess, they didn't really understand that Vancouver was sold a, you know, a boat of, I guess, false goods, right? They thought they're coming into esports, they're going to make all this money. They probably couldn't even pay operating costs with all the tournament winnings, and we won a lot of money that year, right?
Yeah.
So it was kind of this like fundamental split, I would say. And then you capped it off with like there was internal issues. Like every team is going to have internal issues that we couldn't necessarily address easily because, you know, it was good for some things that the company and the team were so isolated, but this is a corporation that works on like, hey, we need like several weeks to approve this, and then we need to, you know, get like all our processes in order. Versus when you're in esports, it's like everything is like very immediate. You need things when you ask for them, right? So I think that came to a head kind of after I left, and it's more because like these are two sides where they can't fundamentally communicate, they can't fundamentally understand one another, and they don't even speak the same language, right? I know you reported on the situation, but like when there's internal drama, the team doesn't have like, after I leave, the team doesn't have like a general manager that they can talk to about, you know, issues, if they have issues with the coach, or if the coach has issues with the players, or if the players have issues with each other. They don't have the right staff in place for that. They don't have even like, I guess this is the other thing. They were used to like a giant mansion in LA where we lived, and then they get thrown into like these apartments that, I mean, apartments is kind of, it's a little bit generous.
Well, yeah, they looked like 2-star hotel rooms.
Yeah, exactly. Like some of them didn't even have windows, from what I was told. So it's like they're like living this super uncomfortable life to them, and they kind of feel like, you know, we got second place for you guys last year. We did so much for this organization, like we legitimized it, and yet we're getting treated worse than we were the year prior, right? And then to cap that off, they added 2 new players after making cuts during the offseason with Ryu Hong and Fisher. And these 2 new players were getting paid significantly more than, you know, they're getting paid combined salaries of several star players on the team prior, right? So that's obviously going to breed, you know, discontent. And it was just all these factors coming together at once. And finally, I think like this is the part where I'm a little bit fuzzy on because I wasn't part of the team. I believe that the team just came together and realized, you know, it's not going to work. And the organization was kind of like saying, you have to do like kind of, I guess what's the word for this? Like you have to kind of like fall in line maybe. And at that point, I think they just boycotted and it just ended terribly. When I think like I kind of said this, but I felt like this split was kind of inevitable. They didn't patch up any of the real holes in the team over the offseason. between some players and some staff, or between some players with each other. And because of that, it just like it led to stagnation. And I think that, you know, the company probably thought we got second place. We don't need to do that much to maintain that. But the problem was that's just not true, and they just weren't aware because they are not actively involved with the team.
Yeah, I mean, that was the typical thing that sort of, you know, when I was like reporting on it, because it was, you know, it was a pretty long and in-depth article. I spent a while on it. Basically, it came out at the end of May, and I think it was at the start of the month when the team was kind of unceremoniously cut. And so it was like I was trying to pull together all these, you know, disparate parts of the story. And it was difficult as well because obviously they're, you know, South Korean, very, you know, that is in itself an often kind of impenetrable wall of silence when it comes to issues. So it was a lot of work to run it all down. But basically the key component, as you said, seemed to be that, you know, the players were being put in a situation which they felt was a downgrade, that they felt didn't live up to promises that the organization had made, that they were isolated, that there was something of a cultural impasse as well. You know, like if you do a fan meetup for Korean players that don't speak English and you don't even take a translator or anything there, you know, it's like these types of oversight, again, coming back to what we talked about right at the start, these are the tiny little, these are the minutiae, the nuts and bolts of running an esports organization that someone endemic to it is going to, you know, understand, you know, implicitly. And none of these things were there, and and everything just started to build until the moment when the split, as you say, was inevitable. I've got to ask, you know, do you feel, had you been there at that time, you know, do you feel you could have made a difference, or do you think you probably would have gone down with the Titanic?
So I've actually asked myself this question because, like, you know, to some degree, I don't feel guilty about doing what I thought was best for me, but I do feel guilty about, like, they're a team of players that I really cared about, the staff I cared about. And like, I feel like I knew this was going to happen and I kind of just let it happen. You know, I did warn them, but I didn't do anything to prevent it, obviously.
Did you jump ship?
I jumped ship in a sense for, well, I saw a promotion basically, and I wanted to take that promotion. I didn't want to be at Vancouver where I felt there was kind of some inside like politics, kind of having Luminosity and Vancouver Titans, or Vancouver Canucks rather, both wanting to run the team. So I didn't want to be a third party in that. I felt like I'd rather just split. And then I also was offered, like, you know, a better contract. Actually, that's not necessarily true. Vancouver did offer to match what I was making, but that I still like kind of just wanted a clean break from the team. I guess keep in mind also that I'm not Korean. And so I kind of wanted to be in a more mixed environment where I could, like, communicate with players, but also integrate Korean players with my, like, I guess my new experience that I'd gotten from Vancouver. So it kind of was like not fully a split, but the writing was definitely on the wall. In terms of like the guilt aspect, or not really the guilt, but rather like, could I have kept it together? I think that what I would have tried to do is push for more changes in the off season, push for obviously better condition, because I don't know if the Korean people on the team were able to push for that in terms of like, they couldn't even communicate with the, you know, the organization. Right. So I think that, like, you know, this team could have been held together by making the right changes. Now, whether Vancouver would have still wanted to, like, just split from all the money they had spent, that's something I can't control, and maybe they would have wanted to do that and just go full budget. But in terms of like the roster tensions, yeah, I think that could have probably been fixed. That being said, I did hear that somebody from the Canucks side of the equation had told the team basically, like, you guys investing in you guys was a mistake. And once things like go that far off the rails, you know that, like, it probably there were probably some pretty big issues there.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you know, one of the sources that I was talking to said that the guy who owns the Canucks, Francesco Aquilini,
yes,
he had seen the international in Dota 2.
Yes.
and basically had said, oh, well, that's clearly a money spinner. So anything esports is TI, essentially. That was his conceptualization of it.
That's exactly what he thought, yeah.
Right. So basically, you know, that if you're coming at it from that angle and you can't understand the apples and oranges comparison of, you know, franchise league and an emergent esport that, if we were being generous, we'd call it tier 2, to the thing many people call the Super Bowl of esports, but itself creates a massive flaw to the infrastructure of that esports game. But you're just looking at that one tournament in isolation. You know, like this is why these people aren't, you know, they really need endemic advisors to stop
they do.
them fucking up, you know, because it probably wasn't, you know, in terms of just nickels and dimes, I've got no doubt they were right. It wasn't worth investing in this team and all the particulars that they had to do. But ultimately, in terms of success and where it could have gone, you know, it absolutely, I mean, they're far fucking worse off since, right?
Yeah.
So if it wasn't worth investing in this particular set of players and this particular project, what does it say about this one? It's you know, and like, listen, if you're a Vancouver Titans fan, I'm sure they're absolutely fundamentally depressed with how the
sure, yeah,
you know, franchise has been handled, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the same thing where people talk about how like esports is bigger than the Super Bowl rather, like, but when you look at the numbers, they're actually just combining like all of, let's say, like League of Legends Worlds viewership from like a month and a half, and then comparing it to one day of like a 3-hour event, 4-hour event, right? So I think that's the angle that he came to it from. And I think it's hard to say to anybody in Overwatch League that their investment was worth it. Like, I think that Yiska had reported this in very recently about rosters, how right now the only teams that are able to make money in the Overwatch League are the ones that are doing the absolute minimum, like LA Valiant, where I don't know if you saw this, but the LA Valiant's head coach posted a picture of his bedroom. It is literally just a bed and nothing else in the room. And he was saying, like, I host meetings here with the team. So basically, presumably, they're all just gathering in his bed to discuss strategy. Like, that's the team that's making money, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to say like anybody is worth it because there's no like end to this in sight.
Yeah, I mean, it's things are really bad at the moment in terms of downsizing. You know, there was that who is it who tweeted it out? The picture of the LAN finals setup.
Yes,
and it's like something I can tell you from like 2000 and I'll be generous, 2005.
I mean, that's something you'd see at a GameStop when they're hosting like a local LAN, you know?
Yeah. And you know, listen, like people were roasting them on you know, social media about this, and you know, cool. But I don't think people just thought it was kind of funny. They didn't really understand, I don't think, how detrimental that sort of is, you know, from a perception viewpoint. You know, like right now, obviously, with all the problems that Vision Blizzard have had as a company and all the kind of things that have come tumbling out of their woodwork, you know, they are struggling for sponsors. I think I did a video about this recently. You know, they've got TeamSpeak as a sponsor, which, spoiler, that's not a big sponsor. That's more about the tech because they use that as the voice program. And then who was the other one? There's one more.
Is it Xfinity?
No. I can't even remember. Hang on. Like it's so bad it is. It's like there's like one other sponsor, and I think it was a sponsor that they already had. But I'll get it. I'll bring it up for you. I was looking at it the other day. So but yeah, you know, it's not. It's the trading cards, Upper Deck.
Oh, Upper Deck, right?
Yeah,
which could have been just a long-term deal.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
specifically, I know it was. And you know, the league's playing away now without any, you know, without any, you know, new sponsors likely to come in, and then you're posting something like that, where it's like, you know, like look at how ghetto.
Yeah.
Well, why was, you know, sponsors are going to see that and go like, that's we don't want to be there. It looks really bad. So you know, the problem you always have is, you know, a lot of people in sales know this. Like when you're broke, like that's when you have to have the most razzle dazzle and sizzle on the steak. Like, is, you know, you need the money at this point. You can't make it look like you're failing, you know? And so you have a choice. You either pack up or you throw some money at it. And with all the money Activision Blizzard have, and they all, you know, internally, everyone says the same thing. You know, whenever I'm poking around on a story, they all say, oh yeah, Activision Blizzard is super dedicated to making the league succeed. Well, it's like, fucking hell then. Put some money into it.
Yeah.
You know? It's wild.
I mean, just a side tangent, because obviously there's like some buzz on Twitter about this, but like about how there was an owners meeting very recently, and or, you know, I guess people's perception is that that's where everything went wrong. I'm guessing that everybody knew everything has gone wrong for like quite some time. The one big thing about this was that I heard that Bobby Kotick was there, and now every season that I've been in the Overwatch League, everybody has been like, not only my team's owners, but like every owner basically that I've ever spoken to has just basically told me this guy's not even present. Like, he doesn't care. It seems like doesn't even go to any of the meetings. So that actually was the one interesting aspect to me. Maybe that's the commitment that they're talking about with you. Well,
so this is the thing. Yes, you're absolutely on point. Bobby Kotick doesn't attend these owners meetings. He hasn't since the original pitches, as far as I'm aware. So for him to turn up and try and put everyone's mind at rest, kind of tells its own, tragic story. Especially given that, the board had an opportunity to vote Bobby Kotick off, and like 90% of the problems would have gone out the door with him. It's just like, he's the asshole. Like, he's the guy. I've never seen it before. I say this every video I make about Activision Blizzard. I have never seen a CEO, right? Like, yes, he had an absolutely unreal period of delivering inferior product but increased share price, mainly predicated on revenue generated from mobile gaming, which, again, spoiler, their mobile games revenue makes more than their console and PC revenue together, right? So he's been the king of the share price, right? The king of the fiduciary duty excuse. And so they've allowed him to get away with, inferior product and bad headlines. But then it's like, when was the last positive headline about Activision Blizzard? Does anyone fucking remember it? Like, I don't. And then it's like, look, we're not just talking about bad headlines and shit games. We're talking about like fundamentally evil things. We're talking about, women being harassed in the workplace. We're talking about pay disparity. We're talking about fucking creeps putting cameras in female bathrooms or stealing fucking breast milk from the refrigerator. Like, this is fucking despicable, and I can't think of a company where the CEO wouldn't have to fall on their sword for that, right?
And it's like, not only that, but he's also at the center of a lot of these stories, right? Where he's like threatening to kill his personal assistant or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's fucking insane. So, at the end of the day, that like the fact that he's still there and now turning up to these meetings, that wouldn't put my fucking mind at rest. If I was one of those owners, I would be saying, it's you, motherfucker. It's you. It's always been you. You're the fundamental problem. You're one of the major reasons this can't succeed. You were the guy who wanted to bring in all the sports orgs and the sports executives that don't understand esports at the start, rejecting endemic people after you told them, by the way, don't recruit a team. We'll get you on the flip side when we expand, because, we don't want to have to buy you out, because originally it was a proposed draft. Then they realized legally they couldn't do that, because when you have like a collegiate draft style system, you've got to have a players association, which they absolutely didn't want to set up at the start. So, I mean, look, these, it's like, dude, like, turning up to this meeting doesn't help me. Where's the league sponsors? When do I ever see a return of investment on these $20 million investments? Yes, they've frozen payments. That's absolutely accurate. But I'm still stuck with a lemon. Like, and they won't even let people sell, by the sounds of it. So it's a fucking nightmare right now in the league. And you're hearing about organizations downsizing and bringing in cheap labor, essentially, in the form of inferior players, because they just want to grind through this season and see what happens. It's like, it's a really grim time for the Overwatch League. There's no doubt about it.
I mean, somebody posted recently, like, oh, it's normal for teams to go budget every now and then try and rebuild or refocus for another year. I don't think that's what's happening. Like, I think that these teams are going budget and they're never coming back. Like, this is unless somehow Activision revives this game, Overwatch 2 explodes, something like that. These teams are these are bottom feeder teams for the rest of, you know, their existence. They're literally entertainment thieves because, you know, better players could be on these teams, but they don't want to take like less than 50K because you can, you know, put them on 50K, but then make it so that the contract is only 8 months or whatever, however long the season is. And then that's what, 30 something K. So I think that people might be, I would say that probably like a good amount of people have come to accept that Overwatch maybe is like doomed, and they're kind of trying to ride out that last bit of it and just enjoy it.
There's still some true believers. You know, I know because I talk to them, and my mind is blown away still. But they think Overwatch 2 is gonna pop off and save them.
I mean, this was their opportunity, wasn't it? This whole season, they could have done something with it. It's like they couldn't even maintain interest for less than a week. Like,
no, I saw that with the promotional aspect of it, where you could get into the beta and stuff, right? And that didn't even really move the dial all that much. You know, once the initial interest had fizzled out, you saw like a nominal increase in viewership.
Like this is Blizzard putting all their work for the last 3 years on display for you, and then that can't even move the dial like longer than a week. You know, like it feels like even if Overwatch 2 comes out, and it's probably going to be a significantly better game than Overwatch 1, I don't think it matters. Like it just feels like its time has come and gone.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, it's like so ridiculous as well, because like, look, I don't even think viewership is the be all and end all, by the way. You know, I think that's like, you know, if you look at, if you use that as a metric, you know, Overwatch and LCS are not a million miles apart by any stretch of the imagination.
That's true.
You know, and so we often point to LCS as a successful example of a franchise league, and the Overwatch League is like a terrible example worthy of ridicule. And yet here they are with relatively, you know, again, not a million miles apart viewership numbers, although Overwatch League is dipping at a much higher rate than LCS currently. But it's like, at the end of the day, you've got to create something sustainable. You've got to create something with a potential for growth upside. And when you're entering brands that have teams that don't capture the imagination, when casual fans couldn't even tell you what the starting lineup is, when there's no like super exciting players that people want to see, that basically you have like one or two power brands that like really move the dial for viewership, but no one cares about the rest. That is, you know, all of these things. And by the way, as you rightly point out, you're doing it on a version of a game that, you know, you're introducing what should be this bombastic sequel that's going to save the whole future of the franchise. And that's really underwhelming and looking like, you know, glorified DLC. It's all of these things are bad, and Activision Blizzard should have recognized this. They should have done whatever they wanted to do in terms of blaming the pandemic or whatever the fuck you had to do. And they did get unlucky, no doubt about it, but they couldn't. This wasn't the time to push your chips into the middle. This was like, it was the worst thing you could do. And with the Microsoft buyout looming, and that'll be probably completed by the end of next year, unless the government takes a special interest in it. Guess we'll wait and see what happens in the midterms. You know, Microsoft aren't going to want to keep this league on.
That's the thing.
Is, you know?
Yeah, there's no reason for them to continue this. Like, I don't know. I have so little hope, because the right decision, I feel like, at any given point right now is to just cut it and then like be done with Overwatch League. Like, maybe the game is going to be good, but maybe this league could be, you know, changed, and then, you know, maybe Blizzard could put out a better product down the road, right? But this, like, what currently exists is terrible, and I don't know. It doesn't make sense for it to keep going. I feel like everybody's kind of looking for their way out. Not players or not staff, but like the ownership groups, right? These people don't really want to. I think that there are. Actually, you might have better insight into this, but I don't feel confident that if you polled all the Overwatch League owners, that more than a quarter of them would feel confident that they can even, you know, at one point be profitable, or at one point sell this spot for a profit, right? Because I guess that's the real
yeah.
end goal.
Yeah, I mean, when I've talked to them, they all say pretty much the same thing, that they would happily get out now if they could take a tenth of what they invested.
A tenth. That's scary.
You know, it's always in that ballpark. To get anything back at this stage, especially for the large conglomerates, I guess you would call them, that own multiple esports products, they just want to get any ROI at this point feels like such a pipe dream that even a tenth of their original investment would be like considered positive. The problem you've got is in the original contracts, and my understanding is this is still the case, Activision Blizzard get to authorize the sales.
Yes,
and they take
I believe that's true. Yeah,
and they take a 25% cut, which they might be willing to waive, all things considered. But it's Activision Blizzard, and you know their primary motivator these days is profit. I think everybody can see that. So it's hard to even get out of the league. Like it just feels like you're just locked in you're just locked in a room. And everyone's slowly starving to death, and you're like, we could open the door and like, look, I've got Uber Eats on my fucking phone, like, please, it doesn't have to be this way. And the person who controls the room says, no, don't worry, water and food will be here soon. And it's like, this is fucked up, you know. So yeah, I don't think a lot of owners are feeling confident. I mean, look, well, since we're here, I was going to do this at the end. I was going to talk specifically about Harsha's adventures in Overwatch for a bit longer. But while we're just here, let's talk about that, report, from the Washington Justice that was put out. And again, it was by Yiska, who's done, obviously, a lot of work in the field, one of the better journalists in the space. This was over at ggrecon.com. And this is about the Washington Justice. And there's a developing story there at the time that we're recording this, because it looks like the team just is about to just fucking implode.
So I think right now they've finally finalized it. And this could change. Like they could have lied, but from what they said, they're done making moves as of today. Right.
So yes, what basically happened was the Washington Justice wanted to sell its players as quickly as it could in before the window closed, because they don't trust that it's going to be worth investing, even to the degree they are, which I wouldn't say they were big spenders by any stretch of the imagination. You probably got a bit more insight into that than I do. But now they're also it was also happened like 2 days ago that they've been closing down their social media and putting statements out, and like we don't know what's going on. Staff are all moving around, and I think it was please be patient, fans. And it's like, again, if you just happen to be one of the unfortunate fans that at the start you went, oh yeah, I like Washington Justice, they got a cool logo, they got a cool name, you're absolutely fucked now. Like you are consigned to just a lifetime of misery if you don't go and support another franchise. So look, I mean, for me, this is probably going to become the norm now, as to what because once one owner commits and publicly does it, because you have to understand, to the listeners, behind the scenes, Activision Blizzard are telling them everything's going to be okay. We're going to fix this. Don't make any changes. Don't do anything publicly that's going to make people lose confidence in the league. If you go first, there'll be a domino effect. You'll fuck over all your other owners. Obviously, they're all tied into a revenue share for like merchandise sales and everything. So if you do this, you're harming the collective, right? That's the pressure Blizzard Overwatch executives are putting on to owners. But we're just at a point now where it's so apparent that, like, probably being conservative at this stage, the league has like a 5% chance of turning the corner and succeeding and becoming a viable esports product that actually makes a return of investment where you can justify having a franchise. Probably about there, and I think that's being generous, frankly. So yeah, people are going to downsize. Like nobody. How many years can you ask your partners to lose money for?
Yeah,
it's crazy. So yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna. I mean, I don't know if you get that impression, but I think we're gonna see more and more franchises follow suit for sure.
So I definitely agree with you. I think that yes, you're gonna see more franchises do the same thing. Maybe not immediately right now this year. Probably starting next year, a lot of teams are gonna go, the full budget route. Mm-hmm. It seemed like Justice really didn't care about what people thought of them, and then finally their staff were like able to convince their ownership that we can ride it out with the current people we have here. Maybe they're able to say like, you know, it'll cost more money to get rid of these players and then bring in new ones versus like, versus just like keeping what we have right now. So they're now down to a 5-man roster, and in Overwatch League, you're required to have 6 people on your roster. They have come out and publicly stated that they're going to be signing a staff from the organization as that 6th player. So some lucky
bodes well.
Yeah, some
bodes
lucky
well.
social media manager is going to be playing on this team, I guess. So I think that honestly, I think that, like, as you said, there's like a 5% chance. Maybe I'll be a little bit more optimistic and say like, you know, a 10% chance that this league turns over and explodes again, or something. Like, they make money basically, right? What it feels like to me is that, you know, it's not 10% of teams that are committing to Overwatch, though. It does feel like that there's still a decent amount of teams that have committed to making like good rosters and like trying to do good with what they have, I guess, which is surprising to me. I'm guessing it's going to be more like a 50-50 split where like 50% of the teams are like literally entertainment thieves, like just don't even bother watching them. And then 50% of the teams are committed to trying to win a championship, which is, I guess, interesting to me in some sense, because I feel like that reveals at least some level of confidence in Blizzard to turn it around, right?
Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, like, it's just right. Like, I don't think Activision Blizzard really. I think it's like just faux confidence, because like everything's just, they just want to maintain the status quo till the Microsoft takeover happens. Bobby Kotick's gone the day that happens. You're going to see wholesale changes. They're going to change business practices. They're going to change what franchises are even developed on and how many resources are given to that. And obviously, they're going to take a look at their esports output. And if you know anything about Halo and how they do esports over there, and compared to how Activision Blizzard conceptualizes esports and what a successful league should look like, it's very, very different. And also, I mean, look, I was talking about this with Golden Boy the other day, funnily enough, and he said, like, he's confident the Call of Duty League has done enough, despite, you know, maybe not hitting its potential, like its viewership potential. He thinks it's done enough to continue existing in its form, but he shares my views that Microsoft will take one look at the huge financial deficit plus the legacy cost of, you know, having to pay all these people eventually when they do decide to sell, or, you know, or get out, or whatever it's going to be, and they're just going to say, you know what, fuck it, it's just not worth continuing. So you know, I don't think it's genuine confidence at all. I really don't. I think it would make no sense for it to be the case. I don't know what they would be able to see in the future, knowing they're behind on developing Overwatch 2, knowing that, you know, I mean, by the way, probably unrelated, but it makes me like super squeamish. You know, if I was an Overwatch fan and not just someone that ridiculed Overwatch, but, you know, like when you see them doing stuff like, hey guys, here's a survey, would you be willing to pay $45 for a mythic skin? It's like, you know, the message that sends out publicly is, oh yeah, we're still gonna have to bleed the whales to kind of like try and prop up our esports product. And it's like, why the fuck would anyone, you know, like, it's still a popular game as a casual game. You know, people still play it. And what they should do, they should kill the esports side of things. This is just being real now, and serve up more content to the casuals. Fuck it, the casuals have earned it. They've suffered in silence. You know, no new content, barely any new characters, barely any new maps, barely anything to look forward to. You know, you can throw out, oh, here's Halloween, here's Mercy as a pumpkin again. You know, and it's like, okay, great. You know, like, fuck that. The esports has failed. Support your core audience. Don't gouge them, you know?
Yeah. I feel like what would really be ideal is if, and I'm not familiar with Halo, so maybe you can educate me about this actually, but in terms of,
I'm out of my depth there too. But
okay, well, fair enough. But I think like what would really be ideal is if they cut off the esports, they allowed third-party people to run tournaments, smaller tournaments for Overwatch, and then we became more of like a grassroots scene where the people who are passionate about it are in this space. It's more free reign, like it can grow organically. And if, you know, if Overwatch League or if Overwatch 2 does do well, then naturally the esports should grow, at least to some degree, right? So I don't know if the conversion rate's going to be great, but it'll grow still, right? So I feel like that would be the natural progression, and then you could have a healthy like tier 2, tier 3 Overwatch, and then it could get bigger over time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect that to happen, and I don't like maybe Microsoft is more open to that sort of thing. For
Oh yeah,
Activision,
totally,
there's no
totally.
way.
Of course they are. Yeah, of course they are. I mean, and this again is the fundamental ridiculousness of it all. Activision Blizzard actively made all these, like, back when TOs were saying, "Hey, we'll run some Overwatch League tournaments." I remember, E-League did one, so
Yeah.
I was there when we did a tournament there.
Right. Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to work on it.
Yes. Curiously, not present on the broadcast.
I think they made Rachel the host for that one.
Yes.
And again, I mean, I won't get into the ins and outs there. But
that was the one with the Huck and ZP drama.
Yes, it was. And and they were like, Richard Lewis can't be anywhere near our product. He criticizes our products too much. I think this is before I'd even like really eviscerated the concept of the league. They were still pissed off about me criticizing Heroes of the Storm. Because Activision Blizzard are just a petty bunch of bitches when you boil it down.
I mean, the irony is obviously it's starting to feel like Heroes of the Storm over here.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, trust me, they'll probably close it the same way. It'll just be here today, gone tomorrow. They'll leak
the journalists will all know.
Yeah, the journalists all know in advance, and everyone who thought they had a job just wakes up one day. Journalists have all put out their pieces within 5 minutes of each other, proving collusion, and you're fucked now. And and what's that? You just signed a new lease on a house? Tough shit.
Yeah.
Incredible. But look, so let's also, I want to, because there's something going on. Again, people have been leaking me stuff. The way the league works at the moment is that if you get dropped now, you can't necessarily get onto another team.
Yes.
Because of the roster window. And so some orgs have been using that as a negotiating.
Yes.
So
basically,
I don't want to call it like a bargaining chip or whatever.
It is.
Okay.
I mean, it is, but like basically what was happening, and now we can talk about it more easily because now the situation has kind of ended.
Yeah.
And of course, like some of these organizations might have been bluffing, some of them might not have been. I don't really know, to be honest. Like, we can get into the specifics in a second, but basically, like, yeah. You can sign tier 2 players or random people.
Yeah, the academy. Yeah, the academy sides essentially.
Yeah, although that doesn't really academy as a concept doesn't really exist anymore. But
True.
Just general Overwatch players, you can sign them. But if you were dropped from an Overwatch League team after yesterday, you cannot be signed. And this was to prevent situations where, in season 3, basically what had happened was Dallas Fuel dropped their star player Decay, and then Washington. Curiously, it was Washington who signed him, went from one of the worst teams in NA to, this person carried their team to become the 3rd best team, almost went to the top 4 finals in Korea. So they were like basically one map away multiple times from doing that. And so the Overwatch League wanted to prevent this. And then they made a very clunky rule that left a ton of like room for abuse, basically. So what happened was obviously Washington was trying to get rid of a lot of their players, didn't end up getting rid of as many as they were expected to, but did get rid of Happy, who people would consider best or second best hit scan player in America, maybe top 2, top 3 in the league. And this is a player who they were asking for a lot of money for, right? So in what would happen in Washington's best interest, right, is that they would sell this player for a reasonable amount of money. They get to make money. They get to offload some salary. Another team gets to level up, and this player, he's happy with the outcome, right? So everybody wins in this scenario. But what they were doing is engaging in like saying, okay, well, if you don't meet us at this mark that's ludicrously high, we're just going to drop this player, and it'll be after the deadline. You can't sign him. His career's done, and we don't have him on the books anymore. So, we still get something out of it by letting him go, right?
Yeah.
So I personally felt like this was probably a bluff because nobody wins in this scenario other than Justice getting a little bit on their books back. But the problem with it is I don't think it's very cool to be basically playing with like a player's livelihood and saying like, you know, this person is he's at the whims of how whatever we feel, because Overwatch League has designed rules in a very clunky manner that allow exploitation. Basically, I don't think they should be playing with like somebody's career, because like, to be clear, if this guy is not in Overwatch League, he's not playing professional Overwatch for another probably 6, 7, 8 months potentially.
Yeah.
Who even knows if next season gets delayed or something like that happens because of the merger, obviously. So I think that like it's super, you know, people can say business is business, but you don't have to play with somebody's like livelihood in order to, like an innocent person's livelihood, basically, in order to get what you want, right?
My suspicion, and it can only be a suspicion at this point, but my suspicion is this: Activision Blizzard are, you know, look, they have been totally resistant to the idea of like a player association for the longest amount of time, you know, engaging in bullshit like refusing to release the rules for the, you know, around the player behavior conduct to the public. When they did, it was an abridged version and not the same official version that went to the players, you know, and it wouldn't surprise me if this was by design, because if I'm an org, I need all the help I can right now. Yeah. Remember, it was Activision Blizzard, by the way, that were encouraging orgs to go to the get those loans for the pandemic relief loans. True. And they even actively worked with them and, you know, did guidance to help them get that sweet government money. Because as long as Activision Blizzard don't have to subsidize them, that's fine. So, you know, so to me, I would strongly suspect, but it can only be a suspicion at this time, that Activision Blizzard have essentially created this rule so it can be abused in this way. Because when an org holds all the cards, they obviously have a stronger negotiating, you know, platform, and that means they can save more money.
Yeah,
essentially.
The thing about this is that, like, so to my knowledge, and this might be wrong, I don't believe this rule was explicitly publicized until later in the season. I think that like it was kind of just an on-the-fly thing. That might be wrong, but if that is the case, then what's preventing them from changing this rule? Like, why does it have to be in place? What really should happen, in my opinion, is the deadline where you can no longer sign any players at all, and the deadline where you can no longer sign drop players should just be the same day. Because what this allows for is, what Justice could do is they could just cynically sign the 5 cheapest players that they could find, and then drop all these players on their team. And then they get a competitive advantage because suddenly good players are not in the league anymore, right?
Yeah.
So that's already like potential for abuse. I don't think that they're going to take the PR hit just to do that. But
no,
with this team, they were already close to doing certain things that would, you know, give them a PR hit in this situation, right? So when the real problem is Blizzard and the orgs in Overwatch League are not on good terms, right? So when you're not on good terms, you have to make sure that you design rules that are like airtight, because when these orgs are not going to care like how Blizzard feels when they're abusing rules and like profiting, or not necessarily profiting, but like, you know, stemming the bleeding. When your teams in your league are on good terms, they're probably not going to like try and toe the line too much. They might ask for Blizzard's approval in certain times, but right now, when they're not getting along, when nobody's seeing profits, when Blizzard's making like false promises, that's when you need to make sure your rules are airtight. Ideally, they're always airtight, to be clear, but you know, in this situation, it's so ridiculous, and it was so preventable, and there's just, you know, a little bit more thought could have, you know, gone in.
Well, it's also again kind of like, you know, a runoff of having a format where for half a year you're doing fuck all.
Yeah.
You know, which I never understood. Why would you want to have these huge off seasons? Like, put it this way, in CS:GO, right? And I know the few Overwatch fans that are going to watch this are rolling their eyes, right? Here he goes talking about his boomer shooter. Right. But there's a reason we've been around for fucking 20 years in some form or another, and Overwatch ain't gonna be. You know, we've recently in CS:GO you got a, you know, the seasons has a recognized player break of a month.
Yeah.
Right. And in that time, that's when all the roster moves happen. That's when Valve are encouraged to make changes. But of course, they're a games developer, so they're still going to fuck up your tournament with a balance patch or a new map 5 days before it goes live.
Yeah.
But they're encouraged to make changes around that. And it kills teams. I mean, 1 month off, right? Just stone cold kills teams. Some players lose motivation. They haven't had a holiday for a while. They've been traveling. They go back. They see the girlfriends. They see their families. Whatever the fuck, they don't want to go back out there, and or they don't talk to each other for 4 or 5 weeks, and then they lose cohesion. Famously that happened to Team Liquid, #1 team in the world, come back from the player break and just slowly decline to the point where they break the team apart. So it seems to me crazy to have like up to 6 months.
Yeah, it's fucking boring. What
about the content in the interim? Like, what are we all doing? Like, how do I sustain? Like, how do I keep you as a fan interested? Like you don't even do this in any of the sports that do have like long breaks. I mean, 3-month break in soccer, right? Football. It's this. They go and play friendlies. There's other tournaments. There's international tournaments.
Yeah.
It's like. There's always something happening, I
mean, this is a comment I made during the off season because in particular, this was affecting me too. What I don't understand about these, actually, this is going to go down another rabbit hole, but before that, what I don't understand about the way that there's these just massive breaks, 6 months, pretty much on average, right? Sometimes even more. I think it was almost, in fact, it was 8 months this past off season, which is what is that? The issue with that is you had fans that cared about this game. Granted, you're losing them, but you still have some, right?
Yeah.
Well, now you've just given all of them an opportunity to go watch Valorant Worlds or the CS:GO Major or League of Legends World. You give them all time to become fans of different games. I was watching Valorant and CS:GO during the offseason. I didn't care about Overwatch, right? There's nothing to watch in Overwatch. It doesn't make sense that you're not doing everything you can to keep this thing together. It feels like every decision that they make is just wrong, And I feel like they have just kind of, maybe they overestimate their their rabid fan base, the people that are live, breathe Overwatch, but they've opened the door for other games to just come take their audience. Obviously, as you know, you did an interview with Josh recently, I think, but he went to Valorant and he has a lot of fans. He probably took a lot of those fans with him. They got to watch him over the off season, and then now they probably like Valorant a lot. Might stick over in that game and not ever come back to Overwatch, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't really make sense, and I don't think anybody wants that break. Personally, even when I was in the league, it was very nice that I got to take some time off and disconnect and not really have to deal with team stuff. But then after 2 weeks, you're oh, what the fuck? I'm just sitting here not really doing anything. You're getting paid not to do anything, but it doesn't feel good. You're in this because you're passionate about the game.
Yeah.
You're passionate about competing. So
you want to be doing stuff, man. I mean, I get almost anxious when I've got nothing to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I go and find stuff. That's why I've got put it this way. Remember, I'm meant to be slowly retiring as well.
Right.
I've still got 3 fucking jobs. It's I don't know. I don't like it when you're idle, especially because what's the point in okay, let's say I have I'm a coach, right? And I have a really good training program, just as the player break goes on, and I can appreciate the improvement. How do I sustain that for that long?
Yeah.
What
there's no tangible results. They're just sitting there practicing.
Yeah. And it's you might have a feeling if we played the #1 team in the world right now, we kick their ass. But I can't do that. And the team's peak might happen at a time as daft as it sounds when there's actually
nobody might even see the peak.
Yeah, you might never see it. You might get shit canned, over some other bullshit. Someone digs up a 10-year-old tweet or something, and you might be no, I've built the perfect team. Help me, and you have to go. It's everything about the league, every idea every vision they've had for it. Like, remember, I saw the original homestand schedule.
Yeah, screw that.
Which would have destroyed, like, players would have got burnt out after 1 or 2 seasons. It wasn't viable. It was never viable, and they thought that was just going to fly. It was crazy, so every vision they've had for the league, to the one we're at now, where it's like you say, just too much time off, has really hindered it.
Yeah. I mean, the other rabbit hole I was going to go down is like, they've changed the format every single year, and they've not had one consistent format, right?
Yeah, how do you even measure success? At least, like, if it was baseball, let's say, and you go back and you go, okay, well, this was the time when, they had segregated leagues, or this was the time when this rule didn't exist, or this was the time they had this. There's always understandable, clear definitions of caveats. So when you're discussing the excellence of the players and fundamental changes in players and cultures and history and all this stuff, it's all there and it's all clear line. How can I say a team that won in season how do I even compare them to the team that wins in the next year or the year after that? Exactly. They've all done it in different ways.
It like makes the history feel so strange. You have to add so much context to every discussion you have. Like, even right now, I mean, I think they've given up on context, because right now what they're doing is they're posting stats, but they're posting stats from, like, let's say Kevster, a player on the LA Gladiators, one of the front runners for MVP, he's played in way more matches than, let's say, a competitor on another team from Vancouver Titans, right? They'll post their stats together from, like, the whole year, and they won't give the context that Kevster's probably played like 10 more matches. So, like, what are you doing giving, like, aggregate stats of, like they've just given up on context and they're just trying to go on entertainment value. But, like, I guess the other comment I was going to make is I was one of the unfortunate people who did get to experience the homestand model as what it was intended, right? Yeah. I think only probably like 6 or 7 teams probably got to experience that. We got sick every single week. And this was pre-COVID. We got sick every single week. Had several players, like, just playing on stage with, like, fevers, and this thing didn't make any sense. We were sleeping at a hotel like 4 nights of every week. We got to practice like 2 days out of every week. It was so, like, by the time, like, 2 weeks of this was done, I was just kind of sitting there thinking, like, is this even worth it? Like, what am I doing? And because, like, it just felt like so poorly thought through, and we were the ones taking all the the consequences of Blizzard's, like, poor planning, basically.
Oh, of course. I mean, not to mention, look, it was the same for players. Spoiler to the people that have never lived the esports lifestyle. Here's what happens. You travel, you go through airports, you sit on a plane for a few hours in recycled air, dried out, tired. You go through another airport, you get to a hotel, you're exhausted, you try and get some sleep, you've got an early start because they only fly you out the day before the thing. And then you get up, and then you have a full day of work, and typically that's the longest because everyone's got their finger up their ass and doesn't know what they're doing. So what should be a 7-8 hour day becomes a 12-14 hour day. And then you're like, fuck, I'm already catching up sleep. You might be jet lagged depending on how far you flew. You go back to bed, you get maybe 4 to 6 hours of sleep, back there in the morning on the next day. Now you're living on coffee, you're running on fumes, and your immune system is absolutely shredded, and you've just interacted with people from all over the world who all have little different variants of colds and flus and sniffles and coughs, and maybe worse, maybe you get lucky and you get norovirus at a fucking esports event, a straight hood classic. So now you're shitting and puking between doing everything that you're meant to be doing. And, and then you've got like a weekend sustained of having to fully commit to that. And then, okay, you've got a choice, go to the after party if you want to. Don't recommend it because that will kill you if you put any alcohol in your bloodstream right now. And so you go to the hotel and you lie there and you go, all right. And then you travel and then you maybe get 2 days and then you're doing it again. And that's it. And rinse and repeat for weeks at a time. So yeah, it's horrible. It's not cool. It's like being in a shit band.
I mean, that really made me feel bad. Like, I think that's the only time I ever understood potentially like how the CS:GO scene might have it, because obviously there's like tournaments all the time and teams are having to travel all the time and whatnot. But
and they've all committed to appear at these tournaments. You don't get to take time off. The org sign a contract with them saying our team will compete in all your tournaments, wherever they are, whenever they are. We will be there. We'll see you in Riyadh. You know what I mean?
After 7 weeks, we were all just dead basically. And and I think like this is sad to say, but COVID was like the relief where we're like, oh, finally we get like a break. We can actually practice. We went from practicing 2 days a week to practicing like 5 days a week, right? So I don't know. It's so insane.
Yeah, man, it was crazy. Look, I know we're sort of at time. Are you okay to sort of run over a little bit?
Yeah, we can run over a bit.
Good, because I got to get back to the adventures of Harsha. I researched these, so I didn't want to waste them. It just looks like we've just shit on the league for 90 minutes, and the fans will be like, God, Richard Lewis is so biased about the league.
They'll stopped watching a while ago.
Yeah, of course, man. Like, obviously, that I'm looking forward to seeing the same 12 names from the fucking subreddit in the comments when there's like 0 votes and they're all in there, like, hobo tripping or whatever the fuck he's called, all these nutcases that are just like, well, no, Richard Lewis said this and did this and he's evil for these reasons. It's like, please touch some fucking grass. It's like, it's insane. Just enjoy the content. Like, Harsha's one of your most famous children.
I actually think that guy doesn't like me. So.
Yeah, but listen, there we go. Yeah, people like that are just lunatics. It's fine. Okay, so let's talk about because this is important. The Houston Outlaws, right? Which I already said. I think this was like, in many ways, like the pinnacle of your career, and you kind of got into it just at a time when I think it was the Immortals Gaming Group took over. And you came in off the back of that, right? Now, the problem was when that happened, there was so much shit, in particular in the Overwatch scene, that the Infinite Gaming Group, the ones who'd originally bought the Optic brand, who Stouts and all of that, and funded all of that stuff, sort of created. I was working on a story at the time that I never got over the line, which was, for some reason, Activision Blizzard just thought it was okay for like Infinite Gaming to own all the contenders teams.
Yes. Yeah. And that was strange. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like they were like signing players and whole rosters. And there was clauses in the contract saying like, Houston Outlaws gets first refusal on every single player. But, other than that, it's a normal contract. And like just weird fucked up stuff like this. And they did this for about like, they got as far as like 6 orgs. And it was just like, there was just loads of weird stuff going on with Infinite in the background. So I wanted to see if any of that stuff had impacted on you when you joined Houston.
Oh, absolutely.
Outlaws. Right. Okay. Because I figured you'd have a story or two. So
yeah, I mean, I can start this off with like, I guess several.
Go for it.
Basically, when I came into the team, it was like with the presumption of like, I get to build a team to my vision. And then after I joined, they kind of like sprung it on me. Well, first of all these players are actually on a extra year of their contract, even though we didn't really tell you that. Infinite signed them to 3-year contracts, and so you need to make do with them what you can. Then our general manager at the time had re-upped a player that I didn't want on more money than I was getting paid. Somebody who couldn't like get out of Masters basically in Overwatch. So obviously that felt great. And then basically the team got sold as soon as to Beasley at like maybe as soon as I joined, or maybe like right before. It was like very close in terms of timing. And this is a company that didn't really know too much about esports, had to get educated, had to take time. And so, we were kind of locked into whatever we had, and whatever we had was not great, to say the least. Right. So I had to kind of realign my expectations and kind of think to myself, okay, this is not the year that we're probably doing much. I need to do the best with what I can. And then we need to kind of like plan for next season already, because this one is not going to work out. Right. And effectively, like, this was another issue though. We were still in the process of being sold, I guess. So Immortals did take on, I think, our salaries up to a certain point, but they didn't want to pay for it because, obviously they don't like paying for things in esports right now.
They definitely don't. Yeah.
So I actually was owed like 5 digits worth of like salary for 3 months. I couldn't even get my tax documents from them. In fact, I had to threaten to go public to get my tax documents with them,
Wow.
where they basically said like, yeah, we lost it. And then I said, okay, I have to post this on Twitter. I can't like let this stand. And then they immediately gave me my tax forms. So that was interesting. Like it basically, we were all in like such a hole and nobody was happy. And it was kind of the result of like just tons of bad decisions being made. Obviously I'd gotten in at a time where, you know, Infinite was closing their doors on this venture, right? But
Yeah.
we still had to live with like some of the consequences. I had players getting paid basically minimum, not getting the 3 months of salary, right? And so that doesn't feel good when you're already not making very much money, and then you're having your salary withheld. It's I think that like it got much better after Beasley kind of like decided we're gonna actually I guess they used that first year as like research, and then they kind of were like, okay, we'll actually invest now. But at the beginning and like through the year, we were definitely feeling like the brunt of the actions from Infinite and the leftovers from that sense. Yeah.
Anything come out of that attempt to dominate Contenders? I mean, did anything?
So I think that was actually the year right before I had joined. So
Right.
I didn't have to deal with it, luckily. But I remember in 2018 is when that was happening. They did have like, I don't know why, they were just talking to like teams. It wasn't even like the best players too. Like they had some really good players on their teams, but then they were just talking to like people that were clearly not going to make it in tier 2, maybe like tier 3, and trying to sign them to like their rosters. Like, what even is that? I I didn't understand what was going on. And I remember I don't know if you ever reported on it, but I believe you probably had like spoken on it. And that's when I realized like the extent of how far that had gone. Like they were talking to pretty much every team in Contenders when I think it was like 16 teams, and probably almost half of them had been in talks with.
I had a bunch of stuff around that. I can't remember what it was that was stopping me getting it across the line. You know, I hold myself to like an unbelievably high standard, like, but I had the contracts. You know, I mean, I probably could have published a watered down version of the story, but I guess like, you know, when I want to do a story, I always want it to be the fucking kill shot. Like I want it to be absolutely unimpeachable, not even any like vagaries in the details, because people just come at my shit like constantly, and if they can like find even like a fucking typo in an article, they'll try and use that to invalidate everything else in it.
Right.
So I can't remember what it was. It was a long time ago now, you know, and obviously I've been working on a million stories since.
Do you know why that stopped? I actually don't know why that how that got prevented.
I think it just went away when they did.
Oh, when they got sold, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was just like, actually, we're not honoring any of that shit now. Like, you know, thanks for playing, I guess.
That's the esports classic.
Yeah, because why would they? I mean, you know, this was like, again, this is another example of what we talked about, you know, the consistent theme of the podcast. This was an example of people that didn't really understand esports taking like what makes sound sense in a business, i.e., let's lock down all of the youth talent. That was what they were thinking. And then we will always be able to select from the best. And it's like,
they thought they could have the entire pipeline.
Yeah. And it's like, first of all, it's not really a pipeline. Like Contenders has been handled shittily by Activision Blizzard from the get-go. You know, next of all, conflict of interest up the fucking ass. If somebody notices you're going to be forced to sell all the acquisitions you bought anyway, and then on top of that as well, like there's not even a high enough churn, you know, in what was then obviously, you know, like you only need a handful of players at any one time for a squad. It's not like you have to have like 50 players on the squad books because you might get like an injury or something. And, you know, it's like, again, they were just thinking about it like a real sport. You know, same as when they tried to expand into, you know, Optic India. Yeah. Because everyone was like, that's the country that's currently massively underserved for esports with a load of money. Obviously, we're doing it in the Middle East right now, but people wanted to go out there. And of course, listen, guys, like you've got to know what you're doing. And they immediately pick up a team with a cheater on it. And,
you know,
fucking
a known cheater.
Yeah, like he's an obvious cheater. You know, it was like, it's so ridiculous. Like, so wait, he's got a faster reaction time than Simple, but he's playing on a laptop with like 10 FPS. All right. Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were just idiots, and I think because they made a bunch of idiotic decisions, you know, they weren't held to them. But in general, though, I mean, I think your time at the Outlaws, it yielded, you know, relative success. I mean, is that fair? Do you feel that way?
What I'd say is that I would say my first year was, I mean, I would personally say my first year was a failure because I don't think that we achieved much. But then we had like the first tournament.
You had a pretty disastrous like regular season.
We did. We had the first tournament win in Outlaws history, which is against a team that went to the finals. So
yeah,
that was okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, you know what, you weren't consistent, but you did have moments. Peaks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What I would say is that we set the groundwork to make the franchise good again. And now, so during my second year there, we became like, what I would say is we started out the year as potentially the strongest team, and then kind of recessed to like the gatekeeper, where we would beat all the teams under us, but the top teams were the teams we were generally not able to beat, except for Shock. For whatever reason, we kind of had their number. But basically, like, I think what my legacy will be for that franchise is at least kind of turning it around in a sense. Like, Outlaws became a joke in the first 2 years, 3 years of the franchise's existence. And I think now people look at this team as like a very serious contender. And it looks like that if they're going to keep their, you know, their commitment to Overwatch alive, it looks like they're set to be a contender for the, you know, the foreseeable future. So I think that's a good legacy to have. It's not I wouldn't say it's, you know, my most proud part of my career, but I would say it's definitely like, it was impactful, and I'm glad that I got to make a difference, I guess.
Yeah. How were the fans with you during that time?
I don't think I've had like a very hot and cold relationship with fans, I think. Okay. I guess like as a content creator, fans already had an opinion of me before I had joined kind of the Overwatch League. Mm-hmm. And I would say, like, you know, in some ways, like, fan reaction to stuff did help me understand myself better, in terms of, like, you know, they don't know you, but they might point out something about you that you didn't know about yourself. Mm-hmm. In particular, I guess a lot of them felt that I was, like, you know, particularly condescending or things like that, because, you know, I'm coming at topics with, you know, more information than is publicly available to them, right?
Yeah.
And if I don't agree with fans, then, and I like am condescending, then it's obviously going to look really bad to them. They're going to react very extremely to that, right? So I think in some ways that probably set up the stage for a lot of fans to like me, and then a lot of fans to hate me. So it's been, I would say, you know, nowadays people don't think of me very extremely. I think people are generally warmed up to me, but I would say, like, at different times, like in Vancouver, for example, fans loved me. And then in my first year in Houston, fans hated me probably. And then in my second year in Houston, fans were probably neutral, is what I would say. So I think it kind of just reflects, like, for coaches, my guess is it kind of just reflects results. When you're doing well, they love you. When you're not doing well, they hate you. And there's no real, like, I guess, like, there's no added layer of, like, I guess, context even, like why things might be going wrong or what's happening behind the scenes. It's just kind of like pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it never really seems to hit the same level it does in mainstream sports, where, like, yes, the coach will always have to fall on his sword or be fired before the players get touched. That's just generally the rule. You essentially act as a secondary layer of insulation to protect the players. Yeah. But, you know, in sports, you know, for example, we're seeing it again in soccer. I'm politely using soccer because for your benefit,
right?
But you know, you see it where, like, if a manager's having a tough time because an owner won't back him, they want to get rid of the owners. You know, they protest the ownership. But yeah, very coach focused. A lot of the criticism in esports, it seems to be, and certainly players as well. I'm not saying players don't get criticized, because they obviously do to a ridiculous amount, especially in games where betting is prevalent.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know. So look, the other one, the other org where, you know, it's kind of not talked about so much is, obviously, I've got to talk about the Washington Justice.
Yeah, of course.
I got to, like, I can't not. What a fucking shit show all of that was. And
yes.
I've got, like, so just so people don't know, again, I was working on a story about this at the time, and it was something, again, I never got over the line. But basically, there was a lot of, you know, listen, and I've got no issue with this. I don't want to sound like I'm entering into the chudosphere, you know, by talking about, like, you know, women being appointed into roles or anything like that.
Right.
That's not who I am. But, you know, there was a lot of pride in Washington Justice having a female GM, and then eventually, I think the first female coach in Overwatch history with Vala. And listen, you know, I'm not, I don't want to get into the ins and outs of, you know, oh, Richard, you're implying it was, like, you know, appointed on that basis. I don't know enough about who made the decisions or what the thought process was. What I do know was that there was a lot of water carrying done behind the scenes to overlook what Kate was doing to players, to staff. And also, did it ever get out that Avala had completely misrepresented her experience in multiple public interviews, and in fact hadn't been a coach at Optic and stuff like this? Did that ever get out?
That I don't, to be honest, I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either. Like, you know, but certainly I was on that. There was a number of interviews where, like, I was talking to representatives at Optic, obviously, you know everybody over there, and they were like, no, she, like, did some translation work for us and stuff, but never a coach, you know. And you know, it just seemed like there was just so much fuckery going on at Washington Justice, where it was just being, like, mismanaged. All roads were leading back to, like, individuals either lying about their expertise or doing really shady shit and just nasty stuff to people. And yeah, it was sort of being covered up because, again, Activision Blizzard's wall of silence is anything that makes the league look bad could tank the league. We mustn't have any criticism aimed at anyone ever in the league. Journalists are bad. The truth is bad. Fuck everyone. This is totally fine. So obviously you were there in theory.
In theory, yeah. So I guess to set the stage, obviously, you know, I don't mind coming out and saying this now. Like, obviously, I talked to you about this because you reached out and said, you know, if you need help, like, talk to me.
Yeah.
And I guess to preface this as well, I will say, like, Activision did, you know, fuck all for me. They, like, kind of tried to ignore it and put it under the, you know, the bridge. And the people that did help were, obviously, you had reached out to see if you could do anything, and Monty, who I guess a lot of Overwatch fans have turned on, like, he was constantly trying to help me and like messaging me every day, like keeping in touch and seeing what my situation was and stuff like that. So obviously I'm, like, very grateful for that situation. I don't know if I've ever told him, like, that how much that helped, and, like, how he basically had to, like, bug Overwatch League every day and, like, tell them, like, hey, like, have you checked in with Harsha? Like, have you do you know what's actually happened behind the scenes and stuff like that? So yeah, anyways, that was the preface. But, like, what had kind of happened was I was thinking, like, you know, Shock has a really good coaching staff when I was there. They had 3 coaches kind of in, like, the hierarchy above me. And I kind of felt like I could either spend another year developing myself under them, but obviously it's going to be under them because that was kind of the hierarchy that we had, or I could go somewhere else and try and learn from more hands-on experience, being somebody with more responsibility and obviously more money. I guess that's kind of the given, right? But I chose that path because I wanted to kind of throw myself into, like, the fire, right? And because of that, well, and I guess to be clear, I didn't choose that. I didn't necessarily decide already that I chose that path, but that was kind of where I was leaning, right? So because of that, I started putting out feelers and seeing if teams were interested, and Washington pretty immediately was interested. I actually was friends with the GM, Kate. Like, she's somebody, not, like, particularly close, but she's somebody I'd spoken to on Discord a decent amount of times and stuff like that, right? So I ended up meeting her. She said, "Yeah, we can bring you on." And I was thinking, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna probably join this team." What had ended up happening is I think they added me to their internal Discord, and when that happened, people in the team spoke to Shock staff, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't know Harsha had joined." Well, I didn't actually join yet. I was just thinking that I'm probably going to join, but I'm not 100% sure yet. I need to clear things up with my ownership. I need to clear things up with my staff. And so where my mistake came in is not talking to them first, and kind of thinking that I might be betraying them by pursuing another position, right? I should have just come to them, been very transparent about like what I was thinking about. But then what ended up happening is they made it seem to the Shock staff that I was like already doing work, that I was committed to justice, had already, become a part of this org. And basically Shock was not happy about that, right? That's a big no-no working for two teams, obviously. So they called me up and said like, "Hey, we heard you're working with justice." I was like, "Oh no, I haven't decided yet." And basically this conversation went in a way where like I realized like these guys don't believe that I haven't fully joined this other team, right? They're kind of like calling me and confronting me. And I kind of just took this like, all right, well, if you want me to be gone, I'll just go to justice then. So it was kind of like a complicated situation that could have been avoided by like every party involved. Like Shock could have listened to me when I was saying, I haven't really made a decision, or justice obviously should not have leaked that I had joined their team when I hadn't actually joined their team. And I should have just spoken to Shock in the first place. Basically, what this ends up with is I say, "Okay, I'll join justice." Come to agree with numbers with them, housing numbers, salary numbers. I sent all of this to you, so you've seen this before, and it looks pretty obvious that this is set in stone. And then they come to me saying, "Oh, our other staff didn't approve of you joining, so we're actually not going to bring you on."
Yeah.
And that's when I was like,
just to outline it here for people listening, unequivocally, they had made you an offer. It was like, join our team. Kate had said, join our team. You were set to join. You had said to your other guys, like, "I'm out."
Yeah.
And then and only then did they think to sort of confer with staff, and someone somewhere apparently has decided suddenly, actually, no, you can't join it because it's a bad idea for undisclosed reasons, which left you in the shit.
And I wouldn't even, and to be honest, like I was mad about this whole situation for a long time.
Of course, yeah.
I've realized that I don't even blame their other staff for the situation. Like it's totally in their right not to want me. Now I have suspicions to why they didn't want me, and that's kind of a little different because like I had joined their trials and I was kind of disagreeing with a lot of their decisions. Their star player is actually one that I had stolen away from Shock, and they weren't thinking about signing him. Corey, he's now in Valorant. They weren't actually thinking about signing him until I was like, "You guys really should take another look at this guy." But basically, I think we're disagreeing a lot about gameplay aspects or about player scouting, right? And so my suspicion is that's probably why they did not want me joining the team. Maybe it was too much conflict in their opinion or something like that. In the end, like they should have confirmed this with their staff though. Like Kate should have confirmed that she could make me an offer before she made me an offer. You know what I mean? So like, even though, yeah, the staff kind of screwed me, I don't really blame them because it's their right to like build the team that they want to build. And if the GM makes me a promise, they weren't the ones doing that. The GM was. So
yeah,
the only person I don't really have sympathy for in this whole situation is basically Kate. Because not only did she like make me fake promises and then cut me, and then I was basically I basically had to like hope and pray that Shock would let me stay in the housing that they had given me. And it was cheap housing. They didn't really care. They were very nice to me. So after this whole situation happened, they let me stay. And and when I wasn't in the Shock house or the Shock apartments rather, there's another coach who's named Brad. He's the head coach for the Atlanta Reign now. and he's somebody who's always been looking out for me and someone who's super nice to me as well. So I should have added him in the acknowledgements with you and Monty as well. He would let me, you know, come stay with him and stuff like that. So I basically was very lucky to have this like network, but I could have just basically been homeless and not have any money. And, you know, if these teams were vengeful that the situation had occurred, I could have been screwed basically. And she didn't even care about this. She basically like threatened me and told me like, we can turn this into like a problem, and brought like her identity into it. And that's not something that was even like a point of discussion. This is a person I was like a friend with, you know? So,
yeah. And to be clear, what did she say?
I don't remember the exact wording, but
it's okay to paraphrase.
I think it was something along the lines of like, we can make this a big problem. Like, and the identity was mentioned there, but it's not something that we'd ever spoken about or something I've ever even cared about. And it like just caught me very off guard because it was super aggressive. I do still have that message, but I don't remember. I could look for it if you want. I don't know. No,
it's okay. I mean, look, the story that was, you know, it never became necessary to release it essentially.
Yeah.
But was obviously you had this GM that was kind of like out of control in terms of how, you know, like it's very destructive to be promising people things that then don't manifest, especially when they're making decisions based around those promises and you don't follow through. And like you say, you know, you found yourself in a situation that could have been much, much worse if there weren't people around you to like help out. And many esports workers find themselves in that position. So like when you extend an offer to someone, I know obviously in the business world, everyone says, don't do anything until you get it in writing. But, you know, verbal offers in esports are just, again, generally how things are done. You do it all with a handshake and people, you know, then resign from a job and they go and move and they take another job, you know. And it's like, yeah, to then essentially try and bully you and not talking about it publicly by by inferring she would like suggest there was something untoward about your behavior. It was really fucking sinister. And my understanding is as well, I don't think you were the only person she had made like false promises to, correct?
Right. I was the highest profile person, but there were several players that this had happened to. Now, I will say, I think I probably had a little bit more of like a confirmation that I was getting signed because she'd been in contact with me constantly saying like, okay, I got the budget approved for your signing. We're good to go. I'll probably have the contract in a few days, stuff like that. Right. I think she more or less told players like, yeah, I'm bringing you to the team. But I think that was like more of like, I mean, it's not great either. It's not good either. Yeah. But I think that like I had a little bit more of a reason to think that this was going to happen. Now, like, obviously this is her inexperience as a GM, right? It's not really, I don't think she was trying to be sinister. I think she just didn't know like what she can and can't do and thought that she was going to be able to do all these things, right?
Sure, she was out of her depth.
Yeah, she was just out of her depth. And I would have some sympathy there if she didn't basically like threaten me after. I think that was the turning point where I was like, okay, well, first you kind of ruined my life. Second, now you're trying to threaten me into not talking about it. So there goes any like, you know, sympathy that I might have.
But when I was like researching it as well, there were like a number of players that have been, you know, like you say, there've been a number of players that have been offered positions.
There were players that she had worked with actually. Yes. Yeah. So she had offered them all positions on her team. And then basically what it turned into, she's like, oh, you might have to trial for those positions. And then they started not hearing back from those trials. And then they realized what had happened. So yeah, it is, you know, pretty sad, pretty disappointing, and obviously impacted a lot of people's lives. And she didn't really take responsibility for it ever, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, she essentially retired, you know, and it was all done very unceremoniously and quickly. And I always suspect, and again, I don't know if you've got any insight into this, but just knowing how things operate over in that neck of the woods, it was probably done in a way to just be like, there's a ton of drama swirling around this person. If it gets out, it's bad. Let's just all agree to not talk about it. And, you know, hey, thanks for stepping up to the plate and bye. You know, and I think she did make, a few comments afterwards, which I guess all things considered are in kind of bad taste. Like she publicly, not long after she'd retired, she publicly had said like the Fanatics merch is garbage, and other things. I think it was. So it's like, I don't know. I just think all round she should never have been appointed in that position. She didn't seem to be a particularly like pragmatic personality, let's say. And I think, a lot of problems the Washington Justice had to course correct on were, again, like just left behind by this person that had made so many mistakes and tarnished the reputation and what should have been one of the more premier orgs in the franchise.
And what I will say is the one thing that has to reflect on Washington Justice is that either they listened to the wrong people or they just chose the wrong people in terms of who to put in charge of, building this team, right? So I think that like they probably, this is going to be another bit of a little rabbit hole. I actually had interviewed for a position of like coming in as Washington Justice's head coach at the end of season 2. So basically like, they came to me and they're like, oh yeah, we have nothing to do with this old ownership. Everybody that is involved is gone. We're an entirely new team. They kind of really tried to wash it away when, they do have to take some responsibility for that situation.
Yeah. It's just, there's so much fuckery that's been covered up essentially, and people haven't talked about it openly, that it's no surprise to me to see like so many players and coaches and analysts and other people like really disillusioned and sort of taking the decision you're taking, which is like, just get out, like it's just like you say, sat there existentially asking yourself, what am I going to do? Why am I doing this? Why don't I do something else? So look, I've already taken up way more of your time than I should have to sort of just get into these like little snippets of let's see if anyone picks out these interesting anecdotes.
Probably not,
and does anything with them. But obviously again, fully retired from esports, now working as a software developer. I guess to sort of wrap it up, absolutely nothing at all that could ever tempt you back into this weird and wacky world.
If esports became sports, then maybe I'd consider it, but there's no way that happens, I feel like. So I think I was in it for passion, and that passion started to wane. And once that happens, I feel like it's better to just be gone than to kind of stick around and just soak up money but not really enjoy why you're doing it. So I think I'm probably done. There's like, I'm never gonna like completely close the door, but I will probably say that number is in the single digits for percentage wise of like how likely would I be to come back. So and especially in Overwatch, I don't think that's happening.
And no interest in any other esport currently? You're not watching what's happening in Valorant or anything like that?
I don't watch Valorant. I think that I was someone that loved CSGO, even though I was never like in the professional scene or anything like that. It's still like a game that I watch. But I don't, to be honest, like I think that it would have to be a new game that came out that really captured me or something like that. I don't think that there's anything out there, especially seeing how everything is kind of going through the shitter right now.
You might want to wait out this recession. That's coming in, because
ask me in a few years.
Yeah, look, it ain't gonna be 2000. It ain't gonna be 2009. It's not gonna be that bad, but it's gonna be. Some people are gonna get got. It's gonna be interesting to see which budgets shrink and which ones don't. So yeah, we'll wait and see. Overall, regret your time in Overwatch, or happy to have played some small part in it, as mad as it's all been?
I had fun. I think I don't regret it. I've like thought this to myself because I didn't finish school. I'm probably never gonna finish school, to be honest. And like missed out on certain things about being a young adult. But then I feel like I had good experiences. I met a lot of good people. I got to be impactful in certain organizations, right? And I got to just have a lot of experiences I never would have had. So I definitely don't regret it. Now, do I sometimes wish it was a better game? Yeah, but You do. You play the hand you're dealt.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you know, I like to say, I mean, you know, I spent years in Counter-Strike Source, and that kind of got lucky. And the fact that CGS thought it looked better for television. Otherwise, I would have been, you know, in a very different state. You know, esports is such a volatile and unpredictable industry. It really is a lot of the time, you know, kind of right place, right time. And also as well, like just the oil that lubricates the machine is sunken cost fallacy.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you think about it like that, it's yeah. I'm envious. I'm envious of you getting out and having a nice normal job, you know. So so there you go. Look, I really appreciate you coming on board and spending 2 hours talking about all of this stuff. Hopefully it'll slot in somewhere in the history of the Overwatch League. There'll be lessons we can learn when we do a post-mortem on it. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's been, I know from talking to you, it's I know we've left out dozens of other nights.
Sure
stories. So but again, thanks so much for your time, and good luck being a software developer in the real world. I salute you, Rip to a
I had a blast. Thank you for having me.
No worries. And there you go, guys. He's not going to talk about esports, but he does tweet about the Overwatch League. You should follow Harsha, follow him on Twitter, get those opinions, those hot takes while you still can before he's gone for good. That was the Richard Lewis Show. We'll be back next time with another guest. Never know who it's going to be. It's always going to be a good one. It'll always be illuminating and interesting. So make sure you tune in. Until next time, take care of yourselves.
He's the man to do the damage. Oh! As he looks